Colorado Territory, 1869. The frigid winter wind swept across the flat, unforgiving terrain of Colorado Territory like a vengeful spirit, whipping snow into blinding curtains that erased the boundary between earth and sky. 25-year-old Adam Fletcher hunched forward in his saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low against the bitter assault. His Palomino mare struggled against the deepening drifts, each laborious step bringing them closer to the modest cabin that sat alone against the brutal landscape. "Almost there, Penny," Adam murmured, his voice immediately stolen by the howling gale. His life had been reduced to this solitary existence, just him, his horse, and the cattle that represented his tenuous claim to prosperity. 3 years since the war's end, 3 years building something from nothing out here where a man could leave the past behind. 3 years of solitude that had carved silence into his bones. The cabin emerged from the white haze, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney standing sentinel at one end, and a small covered porch that offered minimal shelter from the elements. It wasn't much, but it was his, built by his own hands on land purchased with money saved from years of driving cattle north. 200 acres of promise, a small herd of prime stock, and not another soul for 10 miles in any direction. Just as he preferred it, Adam dismounted with practiced ease despite the cold that had numbed his limbs. He led Penny to the small stable attached to the cabin, grateful that he'd stocked extra feed before the storm hit. As he removed her tack and brushed the snow from her coat, Adam couldn't help but reflect on the events that had driven him to this remote corner of the frontier. No point dwelling on it, he told the mare as he forked fresh hay into her stall. The past belongs in the past. It was what he told himself every night as he lay alone in his cabin, listening to the wind moan through the cracks in the walls. A man didn't need company out here. Company meant complications, and complications got people killed. The frontier demanded solitude, demanded strength. Love was a luxury afforded to those in civilization, not to men carving existence from wilderness. This belief had served him well enough, until tonight. As Adam secured the stable door and turned toward his cabin, a movement caught his eye, a dark shape against the endless white, wavering like a mirage in the distance. He squinted against the snow, certain his eyes were playing tricks, but the shape moved again, lurching forward before stumbling to its knees. A person, out in the deadly storm. Every instinct told Adam to hurry inside, bar his door, and ignore whatever fool had gotten themselves caught in weather that would kill a man in hours. It wasn't his concern. Survival on the frontier meant minding your own business. Yet his feet were already moving, plunging through snow that reached mid-calf, his hand reaching for the rifle he kept slung across his back. Caution and compassion warred within him as he approached the figure now huddled in the snow. It was a woman, young from what little he could see beneath layers of ice-crusted fabric. She looked up at his approach, revealing a face as pale as the surrounding snow, lips tinged an alarming blue. Her dark blonde hair had escaped from beneath a woolen bonnet, freezing in tendrils against her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind, "help me." Adam stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the sudden collision of his carefully constructed world with this unexpected intrusion. Here was everything he'd avoided: complication, responsibility, connection. "Can you stand?" he asked gruffly, already reaching down to help her. She nodded weakly, attempting to rise but collapsing against him instead. Without further hesitation, Adam scooped her into his arms, surprised by how little she weighed despite her sodden clothing. "I have shelter," he said, turning back toward his cabin. "Not much, but it's warm." As he carried her through the worsening storm, Adam felt something shift inside him, a disturbance in the careful isolation he'd built around himself. One night, he told himself, one night of shelter, then she would be on her way, and his solitude would return undisturbed. He could not have known then how profoundly wrong he was. The cabin was cold when they entered, the fire having died down to glowing embers during his absence. Adam deposited the woman carefully onto his single chair before kneeling at the hearth, adding kindling and logs until flames leapt eagerly upward. Only when warmth began to radiate outward did he turn his attention back to his unexpected guest. She sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the fire, shivering violently despite the heat now filling the small space. Her dress, once a serviceable dark blue, was soaked through, her coat little better. "You need dry clothes," Adam said, moving toward the trunk at the foot of his bed. "I don't have anything that will fit proper, but it's better than freezing." He retrieved a flannel shirt and woolen trousers, the smallest he owned, along with a pair of thick socks. These he placed beside her, then gathered his water bucket and moved toward the door. I'll fetch snow to melt for hot water. You change, there's a blanket on the bed. Outside, the storm had intensified, snow now falling so thickly that Adam could barely see the stable mere yards away. He filled the bucket quickly, his thoughts churning faster than the wind. What was a young woman doing out here alone? The nearest town, Timberline, was 15 miles south. The stage route passed 5 miles east. Either way, she'd wandered dangerously far in weather that had clearly caught her unprepared. When he returned, she had changed into his clothes, which engulfed her slight frame. Her wet garments hung from the back of his only other chair, positioned near the fire to dry. She'd wrapped herself in his blanket and moved to sit on the floor before the hearth, her shivering somewhat diminished. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did," Adam replied, setting the bucket near the fire to melt. He remained standing, suddenly awkward in his own home. "What's your name?"
Tessa.
Tessa Ward. She looked up at him, and for the first time Adam truly saw her face. She was young, no more than 20, with features that might have been sculpted from fine marble. High cheekbones, a delicate jawline, and eyes the color of summer sage. Her dark blonde hair, now drying in the heat of the fire, fell in loose waves past her shoulders. Despite the ordeal she'd endured, there was something resolute in her expression, a quiet strength that seemed at odds with her fragile appearance. "Adam Fletcher," he offered in return, nodding curtly.
"This is my place."
"I gathered that," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Not many cabins out here to choose from." The observation carried no judgment, just a simple acknowledgement of fact. Adam found himself curious despite his determination to remain detached. "What were you doing out in that storm, Miss Ward?" Her expression clouded. "The stagecoach I was traveling on broke an axle about 5 miles back. The driver said Timberline was just over the ridge, but I must have gotten turned around in the snow." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I've never seen weather change so quickly." "That's how it is out here," Adam said, moving to hang a pot of water over the fire.
"Frontier doesn't forgive mistakes."
"I'm discovering that." She watched as he added coffee grounds to the pot. "Are you a rancher, Mr. Fletcher?" "Starting to be. Got 40 head of cattle, more coming in spring if all goes well." He didn't mention how precarious his operation was, balanced on the edge of ruin should disease, thieves, or weather claim too many of his herd. "What brings you to these parts?" "Not many young women travel alone." Tessa's gaze dropped to her hands, which were still red from cold. "I was going to Timberline to take a position as a schoolteacher. They advertised back east for someone with education experience." Her voice grew quieter. "There wasn't much left for me in Pennsylvania after the war." Adam nodded, understanding more than he cared to admit. The war had left countless people displaced, searching for new beginnings in the vast expanse of the Western Territories. He'd been one of them, though his reasons for leaving Tennessee had been more complicated than most. "Well, you're welcome to shelter here until the storm passes," he said, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "Can't say when that will be, though. These winter blows can last days." "I don't want to impose," Tessa said, accepting the cup he offered. "Not much choice," Adam replied, settling onto the edge of his bed, "unless you fancy another walk in the snow." This drew a small laugh from her, the sound so unexpected and bright that Adam found himself startled by it. It had been a long time since laughter had filled this cabin. "I think I'll pass on that adventure," she said, sipping the hot coffee, "but I am grateful, Mr. Fletcher, truly." Adam nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Just doing what anyone would." "No," she said with surprising firmness, "not anyone. I've learned that much since leaving home." Her words hung in the air between them, laden with experiences Adam didn't want to inquire about. Instead, he busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and biscuits left from breakfast. They ate in relative silence, the howling wind and crackling fire providing all the conversation necessary. As night deepened, Adam fashioned a pallet for himself near the fire, insisting Tessa take the bed. She protested, but he remained firm. "I've slept on worse," he assured her.
"Many times."
Before extinguishing the lamp, Adam checked the windows and door one final time, a habit born of years living alone in territory where law existed mainly in theory. As he settled onto his makeshift bed, he was acutely aware of the woman's presence, her gentle breathing a counterpoint to the storm's rage. one night he reminded himself as sleep approached. Come morning, he would figure out how to get her safely to Timberline, and then his life would return to its proper solitude. But as dawn broke the next day, the world beyond the cabin windows remained a blinding white void. The storm had not abated. If anything, it had strengthened overnight. Drifts now reached halfway up the door, and the temperature had dropped further, evident in the frost patterns decorating the inside of the window glass. "We're snowed in," Adam announced after his morning inspection. "Won't be going anywhere for at least a few days, maybe longer." Tessa stood beside the table, where she had been helping to prepare breakfast. She wore her own dress again, now dry though somewhat wrinkled. "Will we have enough food?" "Plenty," Adam assured her. "I stock up before winter, and I need to check on my cattle, make sure they haven't broken through the fencing."
"In this weather? Is that safe?"
The concern in her voice caught him off guard. It had been years since anyone had worried about his welfare. "Safe enough. I know this land, even when I can't see it." He pulled on his heavy coat and wrapped a scarf around his neck. "Stay inside, keep the fire going. I'll be back before midday." The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow when he stepped outside. Visibility was poor, but Adam knew exactly how many steps to the stable, how many to the small corral where he kept his 2 milk cows, and how many to the larger pasture where his cattle would be huddled together against the cold. The work was brutal in the extreme weather, breaking ice from water troughs, distributing hay, and checking that none of the animals showed signs of distress or illness. By the time he returned to the cabin, his fingers and toes were numb despite his heavy gloves and boots. Tessa looked up from where she sat mending a tear in her coat, her expression brightening. "You're back," I was beginning to worry. The cabin was noticeably cleaner than when he'd left, the floor swept, his few dishes washed and put away, the bed made with military precision. A pot of something that smelled remarkably better than his usual fare simmered over the fire. "You didn't need to do all this," Adam said, removing his snow-covered outer garments. "I wanted to." It seemed the least I could do. She set aside her mending and moved to the hearth, stirring the pot. "I found some vegetables in your root cellar and made soup. I hope that's all right." Adam nodded, moving closer to the fire to warm his hands. "More than all right, thank you." They settled into an unexpected companionable silence as Tessa served the soup, a rich mixture of beans, salt pork, carrots, and onions seasoned with herbs he didn't recognize from his own supplies. "This is good," he said after the first spoonful, surprised by the complexity of flavors. "Real good." Tessa smiled, clearly pleased. "My grandmother taught me to cook. She always said food should nourish the spirit as well as the body."
"Smart woman." She was, a shadow crossed Tessa's face.
"She died during the war, pneumonia, when we couldn't get medicine because of the blockades."
Adam set down his spoon. "I'm sorry."
"Everyone lost someone," Tessa said quietly. "I was luckier than most. At least I wasn't left completely alone." The implication that she had family somewhere made Adam curious. "Your folks still in Pennsylvania?" "My father died at Gettysburg. Mother remarried last year." Her tone remained carefully neutral. "My stepfather is not a kind man. We agreed it would be best if I found my own way." The simple statement contained volumes of unspoken pain. Adam recognized it because he carried similar burdens, though his stemmed from different sources. "That's why the teaching position," he surmised. "Yes, I taught at a small school near Philadelphia after the war. When I saw the advertisement for Timberline, it seemed like Providence." She smiled ruefully. "Though perhaps Providence has an unusual sense of humor, considering my current situation." "Could be worse," Adam found himself saying. "Could be stuck out in that storm instead of here with hot food and a fire." "That's true," Tessa agreed, her smile warming. "And surprisingly decent company, despite your best efforts to appear otherwise." The observation caught Adam off guard, and to his own surprise he laughed, a short, rusty sound but genuine. "Don't let it fool you." "I'm not fit for polite society." "Who said anything about polite society?" Tessa countered. "I'm talking about basic human decency, which you've shown in abundance by rescuing a stranger in a blizzard." Adam shook his head, uncomfortable with her assessment. "Any man with a shred of conscience would have done the same." "Perhaps," Tessa said, studying him with those sage-colored eyes, "but I've found that conscience is a quality in shorter supply than one might hope."
The conversation drifted to safer topics as they finished their meal.
Adam described his small ranch, his plans for expansion if the spring calving went well, and his hopes to eventually build a proper house to replace the cabin. Tessa spoke of Timberline from what little she knew through correspondence, a growing town with aspirations of becoming a regional hub once the railroad arrived. As evening approached once more, Adam found himself less bothered by her presence than he had expected. There was something restful about Tessa's company, a calm assurance that required no pretense on his part. Still, he reminded himself that this arrangement was temporary, a necessary accommodation until the weather cleared. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Each morning, Adam ventured out to tend his livestock while Tessa maintained the cabin. They shared meals, conversation, and the small space with increasing comfort. Adam discovered that Tessa was well-read and thoughtful, her perspectives on everything from politics to literature both intelligent and considered. She, in turn, seemed to appreciate his practical knowledge and straightforward nature. On the 4th day, the storm finally began to subside, the howling wind diminishing to occasional gusts, the snowfall lightening to gentle flakes that drifted rather than drove horizontally across the landscape. "Looks like it's breaking," Adam observed, standing at the window. "Another day, maybe 2, and the trail to Timberline should be passable." He was surprised to find himself not entirely pleased by this development. Tessa's presence had brightened the cabin in ways that went beyond her help with cooking and cleaning. There was a warmth to her spirit that seemed to fill the empty corners of the place, making it feel more like a home than merely shelter. "That's good news," Tessa said, though her tone lacked conviction. "I'm already terribly late for the position. I hope they haven't given it to someone else." Adam turned from the window. "If they have, you're welcome to stay here until something else comes along." The offer escaped before he could consider its implications. Tessa looked up from the shirt she was mending, one of his that had been awaiting repair for months, her expression a mixture of surprise and something less definable. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose further." "You've already done more than enough." "It's not an imposition," Adam found himself saying. "Truth is, the place runs better with help. I could use a hand come spring when calving starts. Could pay you fair wages until you find something more suitable." Tessa set aside her mending, regarding him thoughtfully. "Why would you do that? You don't know anything about me." It was a fair question, one Adam wasn't entirely sure he could answer. Why indeed would a man who valued solitude above all else offer extended shelter to a virtual stranger? "I know enough," he said finally. "You work hard, don't complain, and can cook better than I ever could." "Seems reason enough." Tessa studied him for a long moment before replying. "I'll consider it, but let's see what awaits in Timberline first." Adam nodded, oddly relieved that she hadn't outright refused. "Fair enough." The following day dawned clear and bright, the sun reflecting blindingly off the pristine snow. Adam spent the morning clearing a path to the stable and checking his fences for damage. When he returned to the cabin, Tessa had packed her few belongings and was dressed for travel in her mended coat and bonnet. "The stage route should be cleared by now," Adam said, brushing snow from his coat. "We can ride to the junction tomorrow if you're set on going." "I should," Tessa replied, though her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "It's why I came all this way." Adam nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling settling in his chest. "We'll leave at first light then." That evening their conversation was subdued, each lost in their own thoughts. Adam found himself cataloging details he hadn't consciously noted before, the way Tessa tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the gentle curve of her smile when something amused her, the quiet grace with which she moved about the small space. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Fletcher?" Tessa said suddenly as they sat before the fire after dinner. "Adam," he corrected, "and yes. Why do you live out here all alone? You're young, capable. Surely there are opportunities in town, people, community." The question struck close to truths Adam rarely acknowledged, even to himself. "I prefer it this way," he said, staring into the flames. "Fewer complications." "Is that all?" Tessa pressed gently, "or is there more to it?" Adam considered deflecting, offering some simple explanation about independence or frontier spirit. But something in Tessa's open expression invited honesty. "During the war I saw what men could do to each other," he said slowly. fought for Tennessee, even though I never much believed in the cause. Watched friends die for ideas that weren't even their own. He paused, the memories still raw despite the years. After I couldn't go home, couldn't face the ruins or the hatred that still festered. So I came west. To escape, Tessa offered. To start over, Adam corrected. But yes, partly to escape. Out here, a man is judged by what he builds, not which side he fought for or what he did during those years. And what did you do, Adam? Her voice was soft, free of judgment. Adam's jaw tightened. Things I can't undo. Things that follow a man no matter how far he runs. We all carry burdens from those years, Tessa said, some visible, others hidden. My father died fighting for the Union, yet I don't hold any ill will towards you for wearing gray. Maybe you should, Adam replied, might be safer. Safer than what? Seeing you as a man trying to build something good from the ashes of something terrible, Tessa shook her head. The war divided enough. I won't let it divide us now, years later, when we should be healing instead of reopening wounds. Her words settled over Adam like a balm he hadn't known he needed. How long had it been since someone had looked past the former soldier to see the man beneath? How long since anyone had offered understanding rather than judgment? You have a generous spirit, Miss Ward, he said quietly. Tessa, she corrected with a small smile, and it's not generosity, it's simply truth. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed almost unnatural after so many days of storm. The sky stretched endlessly blue above the snow-covered landscape, the air so crisp it almost hurt to breathe. Adam saddled Penny and his other horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Buck, securing their packs with practiced efficiency. Tessa emerged from the cabin dressed for travel, her face partially hidden beneath her bonnet. She had insisted on leaving the cabin exactly as she had found it, though Adam had assured her it wasn't necessary. Ready? He asked, offering his hand to help her mount. Yes, she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. They rode in companionable silence for the first few miles, following a trail only Adam could see beneath the snow. The beauty of the winter-transformed landscape was breathtaking, pristine white fields stretching toward distant mountains, occasional stands of pine breaking the monotony with their dark green boughs laden with snow. It's magnificent, Tessa said eventually, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. I've never seen anything so vast, so untouched. That's what drew me here, Adam admitted. All this space, this possibility. Land that doesn't care about your past, only what you make of it now. I understand the appeal, Tessa said, glancing at him, though I imagine it gets lonely. Adam had no ready answer for that. Before Tessa's arrival, he would have dismissed loneliness as a weakness, a sentiment that had no place in frontier survival. Now, he wasn't so certain. They reached the stage road by midday, finding it partially cleared by previous travelers. Fresh tracks indicated a coach had passed recently, heading toward Timberline. Looks like service has resumed, Adam observed. We should reach town by nightfall if we keep a steady pace. Tessa nodded, her expression unreadable. Then I suppose I'll soon discover whether my position awaits or not. They continued south, the well-traveled road easier going than the open country they had crossed earlier. As they rode, Adam found himself filled with a growing disquiet. The prospect of returning to his empty cabin after delivering Tessa to Timberline seemed suddenly bleak, the solitude he had cultivated now feeling more like isolation than independence. There's still that offer, he said abruptly. If the teaching position doesn't work out, or even if it does and you find town life not to your liking. Tessa turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. You're serious about that? I am, Adam confirmed. Place needs a woman's touch, and as I said, spring calving will keep me busy enough that having help around would make a difference. And what of propriety? Tessa asked. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch would raise eyebrows even out here. It was a valid concern, one Adam hadn't fully considered. We could say you're my sister, come out from Tennessee to help. Lying seems a poor foundation for any arrangement, Tessa observed, though without censure. You're right, Adam conceded. Truth is, I've grown accustomed to having you around. Cabin feels different with you in it, better. The admission cost him something in pride, but the smile that blossomed on Tessa's face made it worthwhile. That's possibly the most roundabout compliment I've ever received, she said, laughter in her voice. Wasn't trying to be roundabout, Adam replied, finding himself smiling in return. just honest. Their conversation was interrupted by the sight of smoke rising ahead, not the threatening billow of fire, but the comforting plumes of chimneys and cooking fires. Timberline appeared around the next bend, a collection of wooden buildings flanking a wide main street, currently a path of trampled snow between false-fronted establishments. Despite its modest size, the town showed signs of prosperity and growth. A large general store occupied a prime corner lot, while a two-story hotel stood proudly at the street's center. A small church, a schoolhouse, and various businesses lined the thoroughfare, with houses scattered beyond. "It's larger than I expected," Tessa said as they approached. "Railroad's coming," Adam explained. "Town's been growing in anticipation. They'll likely build a proper station by summer." They drew curious glances as they rode down the main street, strangers being noteworthy in a community this size. Adam guided them toward the hotel, figuring it the most logical place to inquire about the teaching position and secure lodging for Tessa. The Timberline Hotel proved to be a well-maintained establishment with a small but comfortable lobby. The proprietor, a portly man named Howard Jenkins, greeted them with professional courtesy that warmed considerably when Tessa explained her purpose. "Miss Ward, we'd about given up hope after the storm. The school board's been in quite a state, wondering if you'd been lost en route." His relief was palpable. "The position is most certainly still yours if you want it." "That's wonderful news," Tessa said, though Adam noted her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've arranged boarding for you with Mrs. Gillespie," Jenkins continued. "Widow lady, very respectable, just down the street from the school. She's expecting you whenever you arrive." "That's very kind," Tessa replied. "When would I be expected to start teaching?" "Monday next, I should think. Give you time to settle in and prepare. There's near 30 children enrolled, ages 5 to 16, Jenkins beamed. "Town's mighty pleased to have a proper educated lady for the position. Our last teacher was just the blacksmith's wife filling in, and she'll be the first to tell you her arithmetic stops at basic sums." As Jenkins elaborated on the town's expectations, Adam found himself increasingly withdrawn from the conversation. This was what Tessa had traveled across the country for: a respectable position, community, purpose. His impulsive offer of employment at a remote ranch paled in comparison. "I should see about supplies before the store closes," he said when there was a break in the conversation. "Do you need anything, Miss Ward?" The formality felt strange after days of growing familiarity, but seemed appropriate now that they were in town. "No, thank you, Mr. Fletcher," Tessa replied with equal formality, though her eyes held a question he couldn't quite interpret. Adam nodded and excused himself, stepping back into the cold afternoon air. The general store provided a welcome distraction as he methodically selected supplies: coffee, flour, sugar, ammunition, and other necessities. He added a few items he normally considered luxuries: a tin of peaches, some hard candy, a small bottle of vanilla extract that reminded him of the way Tessa had improved his plain biscuits. By the time he completed his purchases, dusk was settling over Timberline. Lanterns glowed in windows, and the saloon down the street had come alive with piano music and the murmur of voices. Adam secured his supplies to his pack horses and contemplated his next move. Propriety suggested he should check on Tessa, ensure she was comfortably settled before departing. Yet something held him back, perhaps the fear of seeing her already adapting to town life, already belonging in a way he never could. His deliberation was interrupted by the hotel door opening and Tessa emerging, now accompanied by an older woman who must be Mrs. Gillespie. Tessa spotted him immediately, excusing herself from her companion and crossing to where Adam stood beside his horses. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye," she said, no question in her tone. "Figured you'd be busy getting settled," Adam replied. "Didn't want to intrude." "It wouldn't have been an intrusion." Tessa studied his face in the fading light. "I wanted to thank you properly for everything." "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that isn't true." She hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "Was your offer sincere, Adam?" "About working at your ranch?" The question caught him by surprise. Of course it was. Why? Tessa glanced back toward Mrs. Gillespie, who waited patiently by the hotel entrance. "I've accepted the teaching position. It's what I came for after all, but..." "But what?" Adam prompted when she fell silent. "But I can't stop thinking about your cabin and the life you're building there." Her words came faster now. The teaching term ends in May. If your offer still stands then, perhaps we could revisit the conversation. Something expanded in Adam's chest, a hope he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. The offer stands. For as long as you want it. Tessa smiled, the genuine warmth of it transforming her face in the gathering darkness. Then I'll see you in May, Mr. Fletcher. I'll hold you to that, Miss Ward. Their farewell was brief, constrained by propriety and the watchful presence of Mrs. Gillespie, yet as Adam mounted Penny and turned toward home, he felt lighter than he had in years, the prospect of spring bringing more promise than merely new calves and green pastures. The winter months passed more slowly than any Adam could remember. He threw himself into work, expanding his barn, reinforcing fences, and preparing for the spring calving that would increase his herd. Yet throughout these tasks, thoughts of Tessa were his constant companions. The cabin, which had never bothered him before, now seemed empty and lifeless without her presence. Twice, he rode into Timberline on the pretext of supplies, catching glimpses of her teaching at the schoolhouse or walking along the main street. Each time he kept his distance, unwilling to disrupt the life she was building. Once their eyes met across the busy street, and her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. April brought the anticipated calving season, keeping Adam busy day and night as he assisted difficult births and protected vulnerable newborns from predators. His herd grew by 15 healthy calves, a success that promised increased prosperity. As May approached, he found himself making improvements to the cabin, adding a second room separated by a canvas partition, crafting a proper table and chairs from seasoned pine, even constructing a small bookshelf to hold the few volumes he owned. He told himself these changes were practical, necessary for comfort, rather than specifically for Tessa's return. But as the last week of the school term arrived, Adam could no longer deny the anticipation that had him checking the trail toward town with increasing frequency. When May 15th dawned clear and mild, Adam saddled Penny and rode toward Timberline, uncertainty and hope warring within him. What if Tessa had changed her mind? What if she had grown accustomed to town life, to community and convenience? What if she had found another reason to stay, perhaps a suitor among the town's eligible bachelors? The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple white-painted building with a small bell tower. As Adam approached, children spilled from its doors, their lessons concluded for the day. He dismounted, tethering Penny to a nearby post, and waited uncertainly at a respectful distance. Tessa appeared in the doorway moments later, bidding farewell to the last of her students. She wore a neat dress of pale blue, her blonde hair pinned in a practical style that nonetheless emphasized the graceful line of her neck. When she spotted Adam, her entire face brightened in a way that immediately dispelled his doubts. "Mr. Fletcher," she called, crossing the short distance between them. "What a pleasant surprise." "Miss Ward," he replied, removing his hat. "I was in town for supplies and thought I'd inquire about your plans now that the school term is ending." His formal tone drew a knowing smile from her. "How fortunate. I was just organizing my affairs in anticipation of a change in circumstances." "Is that so?" Adam found himself struggling to maintain his composed facade. "What sort of change might that be?" "I've been offered a position as a ranch hand of sorts," Tessa said, her eyes sparkling with suppressed amusement. "The pay is modest, but the proprietor assures me the accommodations are adequate if rustic." "Sounds like quite an opportunity," Adam replied, unable to prevent a smile from breaking through. "When might you be available to begin this position?" "The school board has already secured a replacement teacher for next term," Tessa said more seriously. "I'm free to leave whenever I wish." "Tomorrow," Adam suggested, abandoning pretense. "Tomorrow," Tessa agreed, her smile softening into something warmer, more intimate. "I've already packed my things." True to her word, Tessa was ready the following morning when Adam arrived at Mrs. Gillespie's boarding house. Her possessions consisted of 2 modest trunks, which they secured to the pack horse Adam had brought for that purpose. Mrs. Gillespie's farewell was tearful but supportive, having apparently grown fond of her boarder over the winter months. "You're welcome back any time, dear," the older woman said, embracing Tessa, "though I suspect once you're settled at Mr. Fletcher's ranch, we won't be seeing much of you." There was a knowing quality to her words that brought color to Tessa's cheeks, though she made no effort to correct whatever assumptions the widow had drawn. Their journey to the ranch took most of the day, but unlike their first trip together, this one was filled with conversation and laughter. Tessa shared stories of her students, the mischievous Turner twins, serious little Mary Callahan who soaked up knowledge like a sponge, and William Peterson who struggled with reading but could calculate complex sums in his head. Adam in turn described the successful calving season and his plans for expanding his operation. As they crested the final ridge that overlooked Adam's property, Tessa reined in her horse, taking in the vista below. The cabin sat nestled against a backdrop of pine trees, smoke curling from its chimney. Beyond it, the barn and corrals housed cattle and horses, while the surrounding pastures stretched green and promising in the late spring sunlight. "It's beautiful," Tessa said softly, "even more so than I remembered." "It's nothing grand," Adam replied, suddenly self-conscious about the modest nature of his holdings. "It's honest," Tessa countered. "Built with your own hands, sustained by your own effort. There's beauty in that which grand mansions often lack." Her words eased something in Adam's chest, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. They continued down the slope, arriving at the cabin as evening approached. Adam helped Tessa dismount, then attended to the horses while she explored her new home. When he entered the cabin minutes later, he found her standing in the center of the main room, her expression one of pleased surprise as she noted the changes he had made. "You've been busy," she observed, running her hand along the smooth surface of the new table. "Thought it might make things more comfortable," Adam said, suddenly awkward. "Added another room, too, for your privacy." Tessa crossed to the canvas partition, peeking behind it to find a small but well-crafted bed, a chest for her belongings, and a window that let in the evening light. "It's perfect," she said, turning back to him with genuine warmth in her eyes. "Thank you, Adam." They settled into a routine more easily than either might have expected. Mornings began early, with Adam tending the livestock while Tessa prepared breakfast and packed supplies for the day's work. Often, she would join him in the pastures, learning to ride at his side as they checked fences and moved cattle to fresh grazing. Tessa proved a quick study in ranch work, her determination compensating for her lack of experience. She learned to milk the cows, tend the vegetable garden she had expanded, and even assist with basic veterinary care for the animals. In the evenings, they would share dinner at the new table, often lingering in conversation long after the meal was finished. As spring yielded to summer, something shifted between them, a growing awareness, a deepening connection that neither acknowledged directly but both felt keenly. It revealed itself in small moments, their hands brushing as they passed tools, shared smiles across the corral, the comfortable silence as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Adam found himself noticing details about Tessa he had previously overlooked, the dusting of freckles across her nose that emerged in the summer sun, the way she hummed softly while kneading bread, the quiet strength in her slender hands as she mastered new tasks. More than once he caught himself watching her as she moved about the cabin or garden, struck by a longing so profound it almost frightened him. For her part, Tessa seemed equally affected. Her gaze would often linger on Adam when she thought he wasn't looking, studying the strong line of his jaw or the way the sun had lightened his brown hair. She laughed more readily at his dry humor, and occasionally her fingers would rest briefly on his arm for no apparent reason, the touch gone almost before he could register it. One evening in early July, they sat on the porch after dinner, watching a summer storm gather on the distant horizon. Lightning flickered among the clouds, promising rain for the parched fields. "I received a letter from Mrs. Gillespie today," Tessa said, breaking the companionable silence. "The school board is already asking if I plan to return for the fall term." Adam's heart sank at her words. "And do you plan to return?" Tessa turned to face him, her expression serious in the fading light. "I told them no. I've found where I belong, Adam, if you'll have me, that is." Relief and something deeper washed through him. "This is your home now, Tessa. For as long as you want it." "And if I want it forever?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Adam reached across the space separating them, taking her hand in his. "Then it's yours forever." The approaching storm brought a freshening breeze that stirred Tessa's hair as she leaned toward him. Adam met her halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that felt both inevitable and miraculous. Her hand came up to rest against his cheek, and he pulled her closer, deepening the kiss as the first raindrops began to fall. When they finally parted, Tessa's eyes held a mix of wonder and certainty. "I never expected to find this when I came west," Never imagined that being stranded in a blizzard would lead to home. I never expected to want someone in my life again, Adam admitted. Thought I was better off alone, that the frontier was no place for love. And now, Tessa prompted softly, now I can't imagine this place without you in it. The words came easier than he had anticipated. Can't imagine my life without you in it. The rain began to fall in earnest, driving them inside. That night, despite propriety and custom, Tessa did not retire behind the canvas partition. Instead, she remained with Adam before the fire, their conversation giving way to touches, to kisses, to promises whispered in the flickering light. The weeks that followed were filled with a joy Adam had never thought possible. They worked side by side during the day, building and strengthening the ranch that was now truly their shared endeavor. At night, they planned their future together, speaking of expansions to the cabin, additional livestock, and dreams that had seemed impossible in their solitary pasts. In late August, Adam rode into timberline with Tessa beside him. Their purpose was twofold: to secure supplies for the approaching winter and to speak with the minister about a wedding ceremony. The announcement of their engagement was met with warm congratulations from townspeople who had come to know them through their monthly visits. "Can't say I'm surprised," Mrs. Gillespie told Tessa as they selected fabric for a wedding dress. "The way that young man looked at you when he thought no one was watching, well, it was only a matter of time." The ceremony took place on a perfect September day, with the aspen trees beginning to turn gold against the evergreen backdrop. It was a small affair, attended by a handful of neighbors and acquaintances from town. Tessa wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton, adorned with lace at the collar and cuffs. Adam, unaccustomed to formal attire, nevertheless cut a handsome figure in his new suit. As they exchanged vows before the minister, Adam was struck by how completely his life had transformed in less than a year. The false belief that had driven him to isolation, that love had no place on the frontier, that connection meant vulnerability, had been thoroughly dismantled by the woman standing beside him, promising to share whatever the future might bring. That evening, returning to their cabin as husband and wife, Adam lifted Tessa into his arms to carry her across the threshold. She laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Is this necessary?" she asked, though her eyes sparkled with pleasure. "Absolutely necessary," Adam replied solemnly. "Tradition demands it." "Since when do you care about tradition?" Tessa teased as he set her gently on her feet inside the cabin. "Since it gives me an excuse to hold my wife," he answered, drawing her into his arms again. The word wife still felt new on his tongue, precious and a little miraculous. Tessa seemed to feel it too, her expression softening as she reached up to trace the line of his jaw. "Husband," she said, as if testing the sound of it. "My husband." That night, their first as a legally married couple, though they had been sharing the main bed for weeks, held a special sweetness. The barriers between them, physical and emotional, had long since fallen, but the official recognition of their union added a depth to their intimacy that neither had anticipated. "I love you," Adam whispered against Tessa's hair as she nestled against him in the darkness. It was not the first time he had spoken the words, but they carried renewed meaning now. "And I love you," she replied, her voice warm with certainty. "More than I ever thought possible." The years that followed brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. The harsh winter of 1870 tested their resilience, while the spring brought unexpected prosperity as Adam's cattle fetched premium prices at market. They worked tirelessly, expanding their operation with careful planning and shared determination. Their second anniversary was marked by the completion of a proper house to replace the original cabin, which was converted to a bunkhouse for the two hired hands they now employed. The new structure boasted 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a front parlor with large windows overlooking their growing ranch. "Room to grow," Adam had said when showing Tessa the plans, his meaning clear in the gentle way his hand rested briefly on her stomach. That hope was realized the following summer when Tessa gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Alina, after Tessa's grandmother. The baby arrived during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of their new home, her strong lungs announcing her presence with cries that easily rivaled the thunder. "She has your spirit," Adam said, cradling his daughter with a mixture of awe and terror at her tiny perfection. "And your stubbornness," Tessa replied, exhausted but radiant. She refused to wait for the doctor from town. Alina was followed 2 years later by a son, Michael, whose arrival was considerably less dramatic, but whose energy as he grew proved boundless. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, learning early the rhythms of the seasons and the responsibilities that came with caring for land and animals. By the time their third child, another daughter named Sarah, was born in 1875, the Fletcher Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the territory. The railroad had arrived, making it easier to transport cattle to eastern markets. Adam had expanded their holdings to over 1,000 acres, running a herd of several hundred cattle with the help of a small but loyal crew of ranch hands. Tessa had not abandoned her teaching completely. As their children reached school age, she established a small classroom in their home, eventually opening it to neighboring ranchers' children as well. Her reputation as an educator spread, and families would ride for hours to have their children benefit from her instruction. Through it all, the bond between Adam and Tessa only deepened. The isolation that had once defined Adam's existence gave way to a life rich with connection, to Tessa, to their children, to the community they had helped build. The false belief that had driven him to solitude had been replaced by the truth that love not only could survive on the frontier but could thrive there, providing the strength needed to weather its challenges. On the 10th anniversary of the blizzard that had brought Tessa to his door, Adam took her riding to the ridge overlooking their property. The ranch below bore little resemblance to the modest homestead it had once been. Now a sprawling operation with multiple outbuildings, corrals, and pastures, it stood as testament to their shared vision and hard work. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tessa asked as they surveyed their domain. At 30, she was more beautiful than ever, the years having added character to her features rather than diminishing them. "Not even in my wildest dreams," Adam admitted, reaching across to take her hand. At 35, he had maintained the physical strength of his younger years, though silver now threaded through his hair at the temples. "I was just trying to survive back then, wasn't thinking about building anything lasting." "And now," Tessa prompted, echoing a conversation from years before. "Now I know that surviving isn't enough," Adam replied, squeezing her hand. "It's the connections we make, the love we share, that's what gives meaning to survival." Tessa leaned across the space between their horses to kiss him softly. "For someone who claims not to have a way with words, you express yourself quite eloquently, Mr. Fletcher." "Only with you, Mrs. Fletcher," he returned, smiling against her lips. "Only ever with you." As they rode back toward home, where their children waited with the ranch hands and their families for the anniversary celebration Tessa had planned, Adam reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From a solitary existence built on fear and false beliefs to a life overflowing with love and purpose, all because a blizzard had stranded a young woman at his door, and he had offered shelter for one night. She had stayed for eternity, and in doing so, had shown him that the frontier's greatest gift wasn't the freedom of solitude but the strength found in connection. The lonely cowboy had disappeared, replaced by a man who understood that true courage lay not in facing the wilderness alone, but in opening his heart to the possibility of loss and finding instead immeasurable gain. That evening, as their friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate a decade of marriage that had begun in the most unexpected circumstances, Adam raised his glass to Tessa. "To the blizzard that brought you to my door," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled company. "And to the woman who taught me that shelter isn't just a cabin against the storm, but a heart open to love." "To shelter," the guests echoed, glasses raised. Tessa's eyes, still the color of summer sage and still capable of seeing straight to his soul, met Adam's across the table they shared. No words were necessary between them, just the certainty that what had begun as temporary refuge had become a permanent home, not in the buildings they had raised or the land they had tamed, but in the love they had built together. In the years that followed, as their children grew and the territory became a state, as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Adam and Tessa Fletcher remained a living testament to the power of love to transform isolation into connection, survival into prosperity, and shelter for one night into a bond that truly lasted for eternity.